Hey, and welcome back to the Flow Show. I'm Joanna Turner, Intuitive Business Mentor, and I'm here today with the beautiful Julia Weigert from Soul Wisdom, and we are going to have a beautiful conversation. Welcome, Julia. So I will tell you a little bit about her and the beautiful conversation we're going to have as we dive in. So I'll just tell you very quickly, I discovered her through her podcast, Sacred Travel Podcast. And I was so excited to find somebody that was also talking about what I talk about. You have no idea how, I was like, oh my gosh, there's somebody else talking about this stuff. I'm not crazy. I'm not mad. This is, it's a thing. And you've brought a beautiful, different perspective to me. And I'm so excited to dive into a bit of your story. So I'll just read your bio quickly and then we'll dive in. So she is a code carrier of the Sophia consciousness, a woman ceremonialist, Magdalene Nodes priestess, and steward of Gaia. Her mission is to support female beings on the path of fully embodying their multidimensionality as bridges of the divine and earthly nature. She holds and facilitates potent transformational containers, allowing you to access your innate soul wisdom, living in tune with the rhythms of nature and reclaiming your sovereign creatrix powers. Her true passion lies in being an endless pilgrim, guiding others on sacred sojourns designed to catalyze a profound exploration of self. In the embrace of ancient lands enchanted by magic, Julia facilitates experiences of expansions of consciousness and awakening to your own purpose in greater tapestry of the cosmos. Tune into the Sacred Travel Podcast to get inspired about the multi-layered adventures waiting to open your heart and bend your mind. Welcome.
Thank you, Joanna. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be on your beautiful and inspiring show. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. And I will be on yours very shortly as well. So thank you back for loving that. So it's a beautiful co-creation that we're creating. So I really appreciate it. First up, I would love to dive in with a little bit of your backstory. How did you become this beautiful goddess path? What happened before, and maybe some of those little first initial nudges that started opening you up? Maybe they weren't little nudges, maybe they were bigger nudges, but what were those initial
Well, thank you for that question. I always feel that this is such a huge question because the more I unravel, the more I get to know myself, I feel there has been these nudges all along. And I hope that also your listeners can relate to that, but it's mostly always in the retrospective that we understand why certain things happened in our lives or why we travel to certain places in our lives, even if it wasn't on a conscious level yet. And so I just want to say that I've always had this calling to go deep. I always wanted to understand, even when I was a kid, I wanted to understand everything. I would question everything. And it's also quite in my nature to be a travel bird in a way and to always go and explore. And that was a theme that was inherent blueprint that was there all along, but there was different layers to it that hadn't been activated, I would say. And so it was my own path, which back then started in a way with physical dis-ease and being in a corporate environment and not really feeling well, not really understanding what to make of my emotions that weren't actually mine. And so that's kind of how I embarked on the journey. And then I always feel when we do have this connection, it's always there. And once we just start digging into it and shedding these skins, like the dragons that we are also going to be talking about, like the serpentine beings, we can tap into this innate wisdom and that stream of consciousness that we are connected to all the time very quickly. And so for me, once I started, it was just boom, boom, and here you are. And like there is, the priestess path, and there is your connection to the divine. And then it was also all very overwhelming in a way, because this is not things that, at least in my environment, I grew up with, or that people in my environment would know like how to deal with it. And so I was very lucky to have a couple of very, very amazing mentors to guide me on that priestess path. And it wasn't then until I embarked on that pilgrimage with Sarah Naya Soleil and Achintya Devi to Egypt. And Egypt has always been such a strong calling for me. Like ever since I was a kid, I can't imagine that everything that was Egypt, I was all about it. And everything that was like ancient stones and ancient temples. But of course, I didn't really understand why that was. And so I had traveled, of course, before, but then this pilgrimage was really what I feel opened such a deep understanding of our multidimensionality and how we can access that when we expose ourselves to these places and sacred sites where there is these energetic vortexes and also consciousness that has been placed from ancient civilizations and ancient avatars. And we can access that like a library in a way. So I'll just leave it at that.
Wow. So beautifully said. And just a piece that I wanted to mention that has been so helpful for me in relation to discovering your work was the idea that it was a pilgrimage. And you mentioned that a few times. And I had not really thought of my own journey in that language. I had considered pilgrimages to be things like the Camino de Santiago and maybe those people that go to Mecca. But beyond that, I hadn't considered that perhaps I was on one, or that my journey qualified, or I could even use that language to describe what I was doing. And your language has given me a sort of permission to understand more deeply that I have been on a deep pilgrimage. And I just really appreciated that way of flipping the thinking, because I think there's so much we can take from that path, and it just sort of gives us a deeper understanding. So I wanted to thank you just even for that languaging, because I was like, oh, it really is that. Like, and I suppose in ancient times, that's the people were most definitely on pilgrimages, and really we're walking in their footsteps now. So I really wanted to just acknowledge that. And in one of your podcasts, you were talking about how Rosslyn Chapel is the last point for many people on a big pilgrimage from the Camino de Santiago via Notre Dame in Paris, and then up to Rosslyn Chapel, and it being the crown chakra. And I have a very deep connection with Rosslyn Chapel, the Rose Line. I'm drawn there all the time. And, but I didn't have that piece of the puzzle. So I just really wanted to thank you for helping me join some of those dots, because I think that's what we're doing together. It's a very, it's an individual journey, but also we're, connecting and doing it, I think, more now. In this new wave, we're looking to do it together, and we're sort of helping each other join the dots and on the journey. So I just wanted to thank you for those pieces, because there's so much information. It's almost so difficult to know where to start. And like, oh my gosh, and you have such deep wisdom and knowledge, and there's pieces that I just haven't discovered yet. So I would love you to just, I know we're going to get into some other subjects, but if to just tell us a little bit about that first trip to Egypt, and what maybe some of your experiences, or and what you got from that, and why it feels like so important to sort of start your journey in a way.
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, also thank you for that reflection that you just brought back to me. Because I feel it is very important also the way in that we see things. And I'm going to answer your question in a little bit.
That's okay.
But I want to say also, kind of like hopping back, and that's the connecting the dots, right? We are like hopping and connecting the dots, and eventually we come back to the center point. But the word retreat never really resonated with me, because I felt that, yes, there is a way of like we are retreating from the day-to-day life that we are in, and that is necessary to like step back and receive the clarity and really be able to not have to dig in the mud all the time, if you want to like picture it like that, but like to really elevate and be able to ponder the bigger questions of life. And that is very helpful also. I mean, anyways, every time when we travel, it doesn't have to be in a very conscious way, but I just saw that for myself, there is so much more available when we do it in that perspective of also connecting with the underlying energies and maybe information that are there and that also go beyond what the common narrative of history is telling us. Absolutely. And so pilgrimage for me is really something that resonates, although, and you're completely right, it is something that has a very religious touch in a way. And so also like reframing that it's actually a spiritual quest. Like we are going and we are having these outward experiences, but in turn, and this is, I guess, true for people who go on pilgrimages, who do that for religious reasons, but it might as well not be religious reasons. It's ultimately an exploration of our inner landscape and the things, the emotions that we go through, and the things that happen to us or for us. And so we get to see this reciprocity in the mirror of the inner and the outer. And that's why I feel pilgrimage is kind of the proper term in a way for these things. So Egypt. I mean, meanwhile, I've been a couple of times, and I don't even know where to start. I mean, it's so vast. And when you specifically ask about the first trip, I feel that opened up a lot on just, the question of there are so many things like physical structures. And when I think of Egypt, it's of course the pyramids, right? But there is so much more of all the temples. And then you can just use that as a representation of stone circles or whatever is around in your regional area, wherever you are, that you are listening to this, that are sacred sites, and sacred sites in terms of ancestors and people from like way, way, way far back in time have come to pray, have come to show their devotion and be in service to the earth, to humanity, and really co-create with these rhythms of nature and use the forces, like the natural forces of nature. And so it's a complete different understanding of what we are being told in terms of what are these structures for. So for the pyramids, for example, maybe this might be new to anybody listening, or maybe it might be not, but I mean, there was never a single dead body found in a pyramid. The pyramid are not freaking tombs. That was like power stations, and they were initiation chambers. And it's just like a lot of things that we hear in history books that are just like common narrative are not true, because it's kind of like part of the paradigm of the power over and like control mechanisms, and not really allowing humanity to understand what the inherent creatrix power that you, as you listen to this, hold within your own being, because you are divine. You are a divine being having a human experience. And so that in itself was just like, I don't know, it took a while for me to integrate and to understand, from a cognitive perspective, but then also in my body, like what does that do to me? Like, what is my understanding of me as a human, and how do I want to navigate? Because of course, the number of choice points and the frequency spectrum that is available to you, like it opens up until the limitless almost.
It's so expansive. And I feel like when you get to that point of understanding that the pyramids are not what we've been told, and if you can unravel that within yourself, it sort of opens a doorway as well to what else is not true and what else is different. And it's a really beautiful thing. And I have heard about them, particularly the sarcophagus in the king's chamber is like very much an ascension portal. Did you get an opportunity to lie in there?
I did, although I have to say, I know many people are quite crazy about it, but I do not fancy it. I have to say, my favorite spot, especially in the Great Pyramid, is deep, deep down. And that is a place that many people are not aware of. And it's also not almost open. It's what they call the well. There is also one that is super narrow, super, not a very pleasant way to go down, but it's basically you really go down into the earth. And there's just this giant hole, basically. And the energy that comes out of there is like one of the purest energies I have ever felt and been in. And to me, this is pure dragon energy. And so whenever I go and I have a chance, I make sure that I'll rather go there than lie in the sarcophagus.
Wow.
But that's personal choice. So,
that's cool though. So if it's called the well, is it connected to the water? Is that how, because the Nile used to be so much higher and, the water was connected with the energy. Is there a connection to water with the well?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, when you look at it now, of course, it's all desert, but the way that the pyramids were constructed and the way that they would work was absolutely with water. And there is ancient remnants where you can see these water canals that were all around the pyramids because, water is life. Water is also an energy conductor. And most of the pyramids are built of granite, and granite again, like being this conductor. It's always, the water is always playing a big role.
Beautiful. Okay, so I feel we'll leave Egypt there for a moment because we could talk about it the whole time, but that was not the intention of our call. So can you take us to your more recent adventure to Chartres in France, and tell us a little bit about you had a beautiful flow story there, lots of synchronicities happening. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Thank you for asking, because that's very present for me right now. Well, I don't even know where to start. So, there is this cathedral of Chartres it's about 30 kilometers from Paris. And why this is an important spot is it used to be, and that's what many people do not really know, it used to be an ancient Druidic oracle site dedicated to Venus. And so back in the days where, we still would have like a flourishing temple culture, whether it was above ground or underground, it is, of course, a Catholic cathedral dedicated to the Marys, but also, or to Mother Mary. But I actually like to think of it as the Marys, the Magdalenes, because it's a title and it's always an entire consciousness and a lineage that I feel that we are tapping into when we work with these codes. And so
Absolutely.
it is part of the Camino de Santiago, which initially was meant a Camino of the stars, of the Milky Way. And so people would go to this Venus oracle to, receive wisdom from the divine goddess herself. And I've always had a calling to go there. And, somehow it never really lined up. And then a very, very dear friend of mine, Jana is her name, she was just on her own pilgrimage in the south of France. And then she was like driving up to Paris, and she called me and said like, hey, do we have any chance to see each other? And it was, when the universe is like conspiring in all of these synchronistic ways to pave the way. So finally it happens. And so, we had a chance to go together amongst some other places. And while, we were doing this preparation to be, able to go, and it was very much the calling of the Magdalenes, of Mary Magdalene, also with her feast day approaching on the 22nd of July, that a lot of things happen to me in dreams. And then like I try to, when I get up, like note it down so I don't forget. So I'm a very big visionary in the dream space. And so I heard Mary Magdalene come to me, and she was talking about there is the dragon nodes and the Magdalene nodes. And at first, of course, I did not really, I'm still not fully understanding, honestly. But she just kept on talking, and I took some notes, and I'm like, okay, we'll see. And then we went just one step before going to Chartres. There was this other place that we went to. It's Vezelay. It's also actually a cathedral or monastery on the Camino dedicated to Magdalene. And it wasn't something I had planned to go. And usually when we have these places, like for me, Chartres, where we have this big expectations attached to it and like something huge is going to happen, of course, the experiences are a lot more subtle. But then when we don't have expectations attached to the sites and we go, and it's just like this blast of energy running through you, and you're like, what was that? Oh my goodness. And so that's what it was like for me at Vezelay. And I was looking already at the layout of the church from the outside, and I was like, okay, something is off, like something is missing, because there was only one tower. And to me, I've been into studying a little bit of sacred geometry and like temple architecture and things. And so it just felt like, okay, there was something that was not quite right. And then we went inside. It's just beautiful. And when you have a chance to visit, everybody who's listening, it's really one of the more off the beaten path things. Still a pilgrimage site, but it's very beautiful. And then you go in, and there is this portal with all, the zodiac signs. Like, why would you have zodiac signs in a church? And there's even a depiction where you find psychedelics, the mushrooms, in the church. It's hilarious.
Oh my gosh, I love
it's really hilarious. And so we went into the crypt, and the crypt also, like, you look above, and it has these beautiful pavilions in a way, and these nodes. And so on the one side, they have what they say is a relic of Mary Magdalene. I don't know, but it also doesn't really matter. And on the other side, there is Yeshua on the cross. And I was sitting in the middle, and I was meditating, and all of a sudden there is this like huge stream of consciousness that is running through my body. It was literally like all of my cells were vibrating. And I didn't have anything to write, so I took out my phone. Yeah, and I started writing, and people were a little bit irritated because they were like, what is she doing in the crypt? Like, she's on her phone. But I'm like, okay, I have to write this down. I really want to make sure to get every single word. And yeah, so again, like Mary Magdalene kept on talking that there is these Magdalene nodes and the dragon nodes. And obviously, okay, I wasn't one of them because it was a church that was dedicated to her. But what the message kind of said was that there is a relinking that needs to be done with the the divine feminine and with the dragons that have always been the guardians of life itself, and the females like us as the embodiment of the female and the divine feminine consciousness on earth with our wombs. They are stewards of the divine feminine. And what needs to happen right now is, because we are in this time of upheaval, because we are in this time of chaos and turbulence, and we can see that so many of these of the ways that we have operated and the systems that are in place right now are not based in truth, are not based in integrity. They are not based in the support of life itself. And it is
Absolutely.
It is the feminine and the masculine together, but it is us as these womb carriers, and also with the potentiality to dream, because this is what the divine feminine does. We are dreaming this new reality into place, and then kind of like handing it over to the masculine because they are giving the structure. And so I was told that there is this relinking that needs to be done. And a lot of these creatures, the dragons, the serpentines, there has been a lot of distortion. And if you look in mythology, like even the most famous one with Archangel Michael, like slaying the dragon. And the dragons have never been these atrocious creatures, threatening. It's just because their energy body is just so huge that they can seem to be like these blazing balls of fire that can be threatening to the human mind. So that's kind of like what it really felt like, a whole download. And I was sitting and I was writing, and still I was like, I get it, but I don't. So what do I do with it? Yeah. So I'm going to pause here for a moment. And then there was other things unfolding.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. There's so much. And what a gift to be able to be gifted that download and that information. And I love how it sort of, again, it might not be, who knows, it might take a year, it might take 10 years until you can look back and really truly understand like the power in those words and the journey it then takes you on, because it's as you say, it's so difficult to see, in the present what the whole story is. So that's fascinating. And I was just thinking, I'm wondering if this, on my very first podcast of this series with my friend Patricia, who I'm seeing next week, she had a wild experience in a church in France that had a Mary Magdalene in it, somewhere in the north of France. And I'm wondering if it was the same one. I'm having a sort of like, hang on a sec, are we looping back to our first podcast and Patricia, and I'm seeing her next week? So I'm just having one of those moments of like, I must double check exactly what church she was in, because she had a really special experience there as well. So I don't know if it was the same one or not, but it's well,
if not, it was definitely still part of that network.
Oh, absolutely. She's been doing a lot of work with Mary Magdalene and the Divine Feminine, and her sister moved to the north of France somewhere, so she's drawn to that spot often. And so I love that. So
ask her. I'd be interested to hear.
I wonder what part. So I'm seeing her next week. I'll check in and let you guys know. So, or I'll go re-listen to the first podcast so as I can, I'm sure she mentions it there. But so what do you feel were some of the sort of teachings coming through about the Magdalene and the Dragon Nodes, or how we might start to work with and connect those together?
Yeah, I mean, that was my big question that I was kind of left with, right, after the download.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, like, let's go to work. So where are the nodes? How do I find them? How do I find the people? Because as you also said in the beginning, now we are definitely asked to step up into not just collaboration, but I've heard another person, I really appreciate his work. His name is Rory Duff. He explained on one of interviews that he had that we are moving from collective into grid consciousness. And I definitely feel that this is happening because we are tuning into the energies that are present. And I very much, when I feel into these dragon nodes and the Magdalene nodes, like what I see is really the earth covered in this meridians. And it's like there is different energies or different consciousness, different frequencies running through these meridians. And wherever there are these nodes, and it might be that, yes, there is a church that was dedicated to Mary Magdalene. It might be that there is a certain spot where her teachings flourished, where there were sacred bathing pools. The water is also, as we already said, very much a conductor of these informations and energy. And so, yeah, that's kind of like how I see it. And then another very pivotal moment for me was when we on our trip. So we moved further up north, and then we were in Paris. And just the night before we were supposed to be going to Chartres, I had this dream. And it was such a vivid dream. And what I saw was that we were on, and I'm saying we because I feel that many, like you or many who are listening right now, might have as well been part of that visual. A vast green open plain and hundreds, if not even thousands of women dancing, like performing a dance. And it felt like it was circles, like concentric circles within each other. And some were going clockwise, some were going counterclockwise. And then on the outer edges, there were like these women, swaying their bodies back and forth. And it just felt like this beautiful lotus petal, like opening up. And I was part of the dance, but then I was kind of lifted up and could see from above. And it was forming this gigantic orchestration, what looked like a mandala. And then it froze. And so it was really, when you have these dreams where like things happen and it's not really explainable, but it froze. And it was actually a mandala set in stone that I had seen somewhere before. I don't know where, but I know that I've seen it before. And so what that showed me was that this is frequency patterns. And within this dance, or this sacred devotional collective orchestration, there is an opening within ourselves as these divine feminine vessels, but also within the earth happening, where it is almost like we are working on a new timeline, because this is very much what I feel is another part with the relinking of the dragons and the Magdalenes, what is happening, that we are actually tapping into what is the unfoldment of time and how can we influence time to step into really that highest version that is waiting for us and that we need to embark on as humanity if we want to continue to live on this beautiful planet.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Just a piece there when you said that you'd seen it set in stone and then it had like come to life in these women dancing. There was a piece of my sort of puzzle with Scotland that came through with Magenta Pixie, who said that the stone dragons were coming to life in this portal. And so it's almost like I get kind of chills thinking about that. Because it's like you're with all that feminine energy was the Magdalene stone in a sense, right? This mandala stone had come to life, and then the stone dragons were also coming to life. And so I feel like there's an aliveness coming through with what you said, and I have like tingles all the way down to my toes. So that's always a good sign. And it makes me bizarrely emotional to think about that and that beautiful feminine co-creation energy. So tell me a little bit about how you work with timelines, how you see timelines, and break those loops that keep happening.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Another huge question.
The first, and we are kind of like hopping back to Egypt with that question, because I feel that Egypt has really told me a lot about that. Not just told, but also taught me a lot about that. Also in a physical sense. And so I guess the first thing that I want to share with the audience is the concept that time is linear. And I know that this is what we are being told all the time, is an illusion. Mm-hmm. It is really an illusion. So, and again, coming back also to the feminine nature, like we are the embodiment of cycles within cycles.
Absolutely.
And when we come back to really honoring that in itself is an understanding of how time and timelines, and line is not quite the right wording here, time cycles unfold. And so I have come to see, and that is, again, something that I learned very much with journeying with Venus also. So Venus as the planet, but also Venus as the embodiment and kind of like the symbolism of and mirror of what is happening with us, within us, is that everything unfolds in cycles and actually in spirals. So you can think of it, it's kind of like we are going up this spiral. And then there might be situations in your life where now and then you feel like you are trapped in this loop. And so that can be a hint that there is always the same pattern unfolding, even over a couple of years, let's say. But whenever you go or you have the feeling that, oh, like, shoot, this happened to me again, or I feel myself trapped in this situation again. Classical one is kind of like in relationships, for example, you always have this situation where you're like running in circles and it's always the same conversation, or also within the workspace, so whatever it is. And so whenever you find that there is a pattern that you have gone through several times already, that is an invitation to really look what's going on. What are the energies and the energetics behind? And how have you been contributing to creating the situation? And then something that I have seen in Egypt, in the temple of Abydos, that is very much connected to the greater cycles, let's say the death and rebirth process, and the cosmic way that the soul travels when we leave this plane and when we come back, is so the visual that I received was, it's these tectonic plates that are almost swirling around. And it was a very specific situation that I went into this meditation session in my own life. So it was a really practical, tangible example that I knew I needed to break it, which at the moment also held many, many triggers for me. And it really was super vulnerable and felt impossible in a way to react or to change perspectives, to come from a different place. And I was shown so that these tectonic plates are kind of like hovering all around, and that I was jumping from one to the other. So literally these dots, coming back to these dots that we also spoke about, like connecting the dots. And so it's like, see, you have, you can use all of them. Like all of these plates are yours. So you choose which ones you want to connect. And there are certain ones that have a path already that is outworn in a way. So this is your usual pathway that you are going. But can you just pause. And for me, I'm a very visual person, but maybe there is also people who are listening who feel that, that there is a different way how that may come to them. But I'm just, sharing my experience. So I could literally see the plates that I have left out in a way that I needed to jump on, which literally felt like a quantum leap for me to go there. But I would see that this would invoke a different timeline. And I knew that it was a lot of strength involved for me and a lot of discipline in an emotional way to go that path. And then when I came back from Egypt, I actually did it because it was related to a family constellation and it was Christmas leading up. I did it and I did that leap and the whole dynamic changed like in a magical way. And I was like, wow, that actually worked.
It must be nice to see some of your spiritual work reflected in real life. And because sometimes I think we're, we are the ones from our lineage that are, for whatever reason, have put our hands up for this crazy task of breaking, those timeline loops or cycles within the family. And what a gift to be able to see it play out. It's really beautiful because there have been moments, I will admit, I've been in circle and there's a woman next to me like, why me? Why am I the one in my family that's having to do this? Because there's so much pain and there's so much to process and it can feel heavy and exhausting at times. But I believe that if we are on this path, we have the capacity to deal with it or whatever it's
totally 100%.
Available. But it can be, I have had those moments of like, why am I the one processing this? Like, I don't even have children to pass this on to, but I feel like it's beyond me within my family system as well. Like it affects my nephews. There's a sort of deeper, wider, shift that happens beyond me as well. So I'm well done for doing that. It's a challenging work and I'm still got a few layers of that to go myself.
I'm going to say that it's always easy, I have to admit. Yeah. But the reward that comes after is life-changing. I would never want it a different way.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it in the long run. And I think if anyone is maybe in a challenging time or feeling like they're in a washing machine with some of their spiritual awakening process, that there is light at the end of the tunnel and it's worth it in the end. Because it can seem a little bit, I have questioned like, what am I doing? I've had those moments, I have to admit. But talk to me a little bit about like the good side of this, like the exciting, what have you gained in your life from some of your adventures, your pilgrimages? Like, how has your life changed?
Drastically.
Good.
Good. I feel, as you just said, I'm a strong believer of that whenever we are given tasks or we are handed or put into certain situations, it's happening for us. And that means that we are either getting them because there is a breakthrough, or we are definitely able to deal with it. And the human perspective grows when we go out of our comfort zone. Like this is true. And then what happens when we go out of our comfort zone is that we gain access to a much broader spectrum of what life holds in store for us. Like in general, the amount of experiences and the amount of emotions I am able to travel and to process, the choices that I can make when I know that basically everything that I want, that I desire, is possible because I have the tools, I have the means to really manifest it. And again, it doesn't mean that it's easy, and it doesn't mean that there is instant reward, but it means that I am capable of creating the dream life that I desire. And
Absolutely.
That in itself to me is like, wow, that's so cool. Like, let's play and don't spend too much time in all of this worry and fear. And no, like, we're here to play.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think we've forgotten I had definitely forgotten how to do that or what that even was. So I really love that.
Same for me, of course. Yeah.
So if somebody if somebody, obviously they've been inspired by this conversation, I hope, but where would they start if they were looking for some of these nodes, or a place to begin their pilgrimage, or what would that look like for somebody sort of in practical terms? Like, because we're going to this the etheric so often, but in practical ways, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel there's different spaces where we can come from. So there is, of course, always the mind space. And we're like, okay, how do we do this? And also one thing that I've learned for me, whenever I hold a question, and I've recently come across this question, stands for quest I am on. It's not something, that we...
Cool.
Yeah. Quest I am on. That's a big one.
I love it. Yeah. That's amazing. Oh, that's so cool. Sometimes it's just so obvious that you're like, wait a second. That's so good.
I know. That was, for me, that was a big one too. I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta note this down.
That's a good one. Yeah.
So our mind poses a question and we think we get an immediate answer to that, but this is not how it happens. And with my dream, the other day that I told my friend Jana about it, and I said to her, there was this phrase in the dream that said, it's wheels within wheels, when I saw these women dancing, and I don't know where to start. And she comes and says, oh, let me hand you this book. You need to see this book. I just met this woman in the south of France, and it's called Guardians of the Dragon Path. It's an amazing book. And I looked into it, and it literally has and it has a chapter in there. It's called Wheels Within Wheels. And what I want to tell you with that is, whenever we have that inner quest we are on, pay attention to signs from the universe, because we are receiving information constantly. And we are not always tuned in to really allow ourselves to receive that. And so when you can read about all of these things, you can do that, but feel what I am a very big fan of is really coming from that intuitive felt part that your body knows. Like, you have that innate wisdom. And whenever there is a calling to a place, a lineage, a culture, go and explore that. You are feeling drawn to these things for a reason. Your body knows. Like, there is an innate self-remembrance within yourself. That's where I would say that's where your starting point is.
Yeah, beautiful. Just as a thought, I'm just holding up some orgonite with a flower of life symbol on it. And I was just thinking, it looks like wheels within wheels to me. It's circles within circles.
Yes.
So
thank you.
Maybe there's a link to the flower of life with that. So I was like, I've just glanced down and I was like, that is exactly what the flower of life is. Just circles within circles. So that just spoke to me. But yeah, but I feel like that's it. And I feel like we all are in our individual quests, like just a little cog or a little wheel within this bigger piece that's happening, this greater unfolding. And I love I was just saying to you, was it yesterday, I mentioned Morocco, and you said, oh, that's the second time somebody's mentioned it to me. And then I was on like Instagram, and there was a guy, and he's like, I'd just been to the best spa place, and it was all about the water and the spa. And I had to dig in to find out on this reel where it was, but the hotel was in Morocco. And I was like, interesting. Of course, this place is Morocco.
There you go.
For whatever reason, and like one of my friends, I was just dog sitting for her. She and her friends are going to Morocco at the end of this year as well, and it's almost the hotel they're going to is very close to where this other guy was going. And so for me, they're the kind of things that I start to notice, right? If something has come up,
yes,
more than once, and then I'm like, oh, interesting. So I'm just sort of flagging Morocco already. And then there's like another confirmation, another piece of the puzzle. There's another little nudge. And so that's kind of for me how these things develop. Sometimes I just don't do anything. I don't research anything. I just have a little like, maybe Morocco. And then I have something similar at the moment with the Isle of Skye. I briefly mentioned that to you yesterday, and it's this little like Isle of Skye, like it's just very quiet. And then there was this like weird label yesterday showed up on our coffee table, like this old, I mean, it's like 40 years old, this label thing. And I was like, what's this doing here? And it just says the Isle of Skye on it. And I was like, how bizarre. So it's just these little things. And like you were saying, it's about listening, watching, being open to them, and asking for the signs as well, like asking that question, like, show me a sign, like what would a sign look like for me, you know? And everybody obviously has different relationships with beings, and bees was the other thing that has been coming through. So I'm obsessed with bees. And then like I really want hives. I want these hives called flow hives. And just bees have just been in this awareness for me recently. And then you, in one of your podcasts, when I was doing a little bit of research for today, you were talking about the bee energy and like the queen of bees, or was it bee priestess or something? And I was like, hang on a second.
I guess it was Delphi, the bee priestess.
It was the Delphi conversation. Yeah.
Or Greece. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, how interesting. Maybe there's something more than me just wanting my own honey. Like, so.
There is definitely something more. I mean, the entire energetics and, Morocco and, of course, also Greece is pretty much the most Atlantean that you can get into where we are. So no wonder.
Maybe that's it, because if anyone's listened to the last episode, it was all about Atlantis and connecting us back to that. And it was the beautiful Yulia that I discovered Priscilla through her podcast. So I would definitely go and check out your episode, your interview with her about Lemuria and Vancouver Island. So it's all these little dots just starting to join. And I think once we start looking for them and then trusting that they are signs and allowing ourselves to follow these breadcrumbs and join the dots, I think that's when some of the magic, because if you're given signs, and I think if you don't follow them, you're not good, you don't really get as much. It's once you start, when you take those first steps and follow some of the signs, then you get more, obviously, right? You're not going to get more if you don't follow them. So, I think there's something to that, right? Once you're in these beautiful places, more magic happens and unfolds, and none of us have any idea what we're up to, which is great. Well, I don't.
Partially yes, partially no, but
exactly.
No, but and that's exactly the point, and that's why I also feel I wanted to speak about that, although. Like my whole mind and being in terms of conditioning is like, what are you talking about? Like, you have just received the starting point. Like, you need to figure this out yourself. You can't put it out there. But actually, this is not how we are operating anymore. And, in our conversation just now, you have already given me at least 2 clues with the stone dragons. And there was something else in it where I'm like, this is why I want to talk about it. And I also want to encourage women or people in general who are feeling these calls or who are feeling that they are doing something similar and their mind might hold them back and like, what are you doing? And we are weaving this mandala together just as, we are already doing it in a way.
Beautiful. So beautiful. Talking of mandalas, you have an offering for the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So that was, of course, totally inspired to what came through in my dream, because also the dragon guides and Mary Magdalene, they were very distinct in terms of like, this is like some serious work. So you have to find the women who are doing this with you. And so I created this offering that is going to be starting on Mary Magdalene Feast Day, the 22nd of July, spanning all the way over the Lion's Gate until the new moon in Virgo, which holds the archetype of the High Priestess, which is the devotion, the service, and also the divine feminine, of course. And so, again, I have to say that it's not fully planned out yet because I feel that it is very much also a living quest that we are on to see what is being asked from us. So everybody who feels the calling to step into this, I am creating this container. We are going to be working a lot with what we shared today, like timelines. How can we open these nodes? And one thing that I envision is that everybody who is coming together, that we are creating this living map of these Magdalene nodes and the dragon nodes. So sharing information with each other, to be able to access it and to really have that net, not just that supporting network of us as humans, but also that literally these meridians, that net of the earth that we are co-creating, co-weaving together.
Beautiful.
I'm excited. I don't fully know what it's going to be yet.
I love it. But you create the container and then allow things to weave. I think that's how I've always operated. I've never had a script. I don't plan too much. I just let it happen. So yeah, that's where the magic happens, I think. Beautiful. And I will obviously have the link to that. And there is a 10% off code with the podcast, which I will pop in the show notes as well. Yes. And then of course, can you tell us a little bit about, again, where the best places to find you are, and it's just some of the exciting bits of work you've got going on at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the podcast several times. It's called the Sacred Travel Podcast. So that is on YouTube, it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, and otherwise there is my website that is called soulwisdom.ch. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook. The Instagram is soul_wisdom_ by Julia. And I share about my own adventures, but I'm also inviting people on adventures together because, as I said, I feel it's very much in this co-weaving that we are, dreaming this new reality into life. So currently, I actually do have one other retreat experience upcoming in September. That's in Switzerland in a beautiful dragon place called Valley of the Light, if anybody feels called to come. And other than that, I do have a couple of pilgrimages or conscious travel experience that I'm planning for next year. Maybe there is going to be a co-weaving with Joanna. We'll see. We'll feel into that. So there are some lists that you can inscribe yourself and just explore that. And also there's one piece that I want to mention.
Go on.
Sorry, that I feel that is worth mentioning, because we always speak about these travel experiences and then we have these expansive moments. And from my own experience, it's been a challenge in a way to integrate that into the daily life. And that's why I have come up with a free program where it's all about weaving more of this magic, more of this integration pieces, and the bridging of the divine with the mundane in a way into your very, very daily tasks and daily practices. So if that is something that you feel called to check out, it's going to be on my website soon.
Beautiful. Yes, living life as a ceremony. How beautiful. Just as you mentioned there, the one last little piece of the puzzle that I'd sort of wanted to mention earlier, but forgot. You are in Switzerland, which before we first connected, I didn't know where you were. And, if anyone is listening to the podcast, a few episodes ago, I mentioned that Matthias De Stefano had been in Scotland and he was talking about Clava Cairns, and he needed to come back there by 2026 with a group of people, and there was something to do with healing time, and he was talking about how Switzerland is obviously it's a hard place, but it's the center of time, and watches are literally and clocks are made in Switzerland. So I feel like there's something there with the time and the healing of time. And I don't know if you have any pieces that you have an awareness of. I feel like there's something to do with our connection, those places, but I don't know any more yet. So I'm curious to know if your thoughts on that, just before as we close up.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting because, and specifically the place that he was talking about was Geneva. And where Jana and I embarked on this Magdalene pilgrimage, we started in Geneva. And so Geneva is very much the birthplace, not the mythological birthplace, but one of the places where like the Swiss structures, especially in terms of economy, that's a very big center. And there is also the CERN and a lot of these UN governmental bodies that are located there. So a lot of actually the world governance happens in Geneva. And a lot of this was possible because there was a lot of money, especially during the Second World War, that was brought to that place. So when I tune into it, there is so many different layers. There's also many, many dark layers to it that feels like they're buried in these mountains and in these caves. So there is definitely a lot of dragon energy encaged that needs to be released in order for this, new earth, these new earth structures to be birthed.
Beautiful. I watched something very randomly, of course it wasn't, about the Swiss mountains being almost like Swiss cheese, full of holes and tunnels and like great elaborate underground structures. I mean, I knew CERN existed, but this is like a whole nother thing. I think they said that there was enough like space within these tunnels for everyone in the Swiss population to live in. Like there's a bed for everybody underground in Switzerland. And he was sort of touring us through sort of abandoned places and things from like the sort of time of the Second World War. And I was like, there, and it just sort of spoke to me as like there is so much more going on beneath the surface than we realize. Like I was like, it was like these beautiful like grassy mountains. There's a few beautiful sheep with those bells on. It's all very like la la la, and then you like just open this like grassy hidden doorway, and suddenly there's like this completely like other world, and it did feel quite dark. And I was like, what is going on? And it just melted my brain a little bit. So yeah, there's something going on and something important happening with the timelines, with time, and yeah, Clava Cairns was where Claire went back in time in Outlander. So there's something with the changing of time and timeline happens at Clava Cairns. So yeah, I don't know what it is, but I just wanted to mention
I fully
that
agree.
Little
we
piece
will
of
find out. More to come.
Piece of the puzzle. A little bit of cheese, a little bit of another crumble of cheese on our little path to see what happens. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I appreciate it, and yeah, I look forward to the next chapter in the story and see where it takes you next, and
so much,
and see what happens. Thank you
and
so
we'll
so
see
much.
What happens? Yeah. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.